It began long before they had words for it, before they knew what empathy meant, before anyone told them that not everyone feels this much. They could sense things like invisible weather in a room, a friend's forced smile, a teacher's hidden sadness, the tension behind a parent's laughter. Even when no one said anything, they felt it. It was as if every emotion in the air had a sound, and their heart was the antenna that picked it up. At first, it seemed like a kind of magic, to understand without asking, to feel close to people without needing words. But as they grew, that magic became noise, a noise they could never turn off. They started to notice how heavy people's feelings were. The classmate who pretended to be fine after being mocked, the parent who smiled through exhaustion, the stranger who looked okay but felt like they were breaking inside. Every unspoken sadness stuck to them. They wanted to help, to fix it, to make it better. But no matter how much love they gave, it was never enough. The more they cared, the more drained they became. And yet, they couldn't stop caring. There was always this quiet pressure inside them, a belief that if someone was hurting, it was somehow their job to help. They became the one everyone confided in, leaned on, unloaded to. They were the calm presence in chaos, the listener, the comforter. But when the room finally emptied and silence returned, they would sit alone with the echo of everyone else's pain still clinging to their chest. They didn't know how to separate what was theirs from what wasn't. Sometimes, they'd look in the mirror and feel blurry, like they were fading into other people's emotions. Who am I when no one needs me? The question came often, but the answer never did. They wore kindness like armor, but inside, they were quietly unraveling. It wasn't dramatic, it was subtle, a slow dimming of their own light while they tended everyone else's fire. There were moments when they tried to stop feeling so much, to turn it off, to harden. But every time they tried, guilt followed like a whisper that said, if you stop caring, you'll become like them. So they kept giving, kept feeling, kept breaking softly, in ways no one noticed. And yet, somewhere deep within, a faint awareness stirred a quiet knowing that something about this wasn't right, that love shouldn't hurt like this. That empathy, when it becomes self-erasure, isn't compassion anymore, it's captivity. But they didn't know that yet. They only knew the ache of feeling everything, all the time, without knowing how to stop. It was a beautiful curse, the kind that no one warns you about. To see the world through a heart that feels too much. To carry the weight of everyone else's storm while pretending your own sky is clear. They didn't realize it yet, but this unbearable sensitivity was only the beginning of their awakening. They learned early that love was something you earned, not through words but through effort, through showing up when no one else did, through listening, fixing, softening the edges of everyone else's chaos. It wasn't a conscious choice, it became instinct. When someone was hurting, they moved toward it. When someone was angry, they became calm. When someone was silent, they filled the silence with warmth. It was invisible work, the kind that never made noise but held entire worlds together. Most people never noticed. They only felt better around them, lighter, steadier. They didn't see the cost, the quiet exhaustion beneath the steady voice, the drained eyes behind the gentle smile. Empaths are good at hiding it. They tell themselves they're fine, that helping others is their purpose, that being strong is what love requires. And maybe it's true, for a while. But over time, even the strongest hearts start to tremble under the weight of everyone else's pain. They started to crave the feeling of being needed. It gave them a sense of control, a reason to exist. Each time someone said, I don't know what I'd do without you, it filled the emptiness inside. Like a small, temporary dose of meaning. They didn't realize that meaning built on need is a fragile thing. Because when people stop needing you, it feels like they've stopped loving you. They began to measure their worth by how much they could carry. The more problems they solved, the more valuable they felt. But deep down, they were running on fumes. Their compassion had become a performance, a survival tactic disguised as kindness. They smiled even when they were breaking, nodded even when they disagreed, apologized for things that weren't their fault. They thought peace came from keeping others happy, even if it meant silencing their own truth. At night, when the world went quiet, the cost became harder to ignore. Their body was tired, their chest heavy. They'd replay conversations, wondering if they'd said the right thing, if they'd done enough. Guilt was their shadow, it followed them everywhere. And yet, they couldn't stop. Helping had become a habit, like breathing. To stop would mean facing their own pain, and that was far scarier than tending to someone else's. No one applauded the invisible work. There were no thank yous for the emotional cleaning they did. No recognition for the peace they silently restored. The world doesn't celebrate quiet healers. It only notices when they're gone, when the calm disappears, and the chaos returns. They didn't see it yet. But every time they fixed someone else's storm, they abandoned their own. Every time they held someone together, a small part of them came undone. Love shouldn't feel like labor. But to them, it did. Because love, for them, had always been work unseen, unthanked, and endless. And somewhere inside, a truth was forming. Fragile, but growing. Maybe being needed wasn't the same as being loved. Maybe saving everyone else was never the point. Maybe the real work was learning to save themselves. They always believed kindness could fix anything, that love was the cure for cruelty, and patience could melt even the coldest hearts. It was a beautiful belief, and it came from somewhere pure. But purity doesn't always protect you. Sometimes it blinds you. Their compassion became like honey, sweet, golden, endlessly offered, and everyone took a taste. Some came with gratitude, others came with greed. And over time, that honey began to burn. They forgave things that should never have been forgiven. The lies, the disrespect, the small betrayals that piled up like stones. They said, "It's okay," even when it wasn't. They stayed in places that hurt, hoping their love would change things. They told themselves that people lash out because they're in pain, that if they just loved harder, listened deeper, endured longer, the other person would heal. But they didn't. And the empath learned again and again that love cannot save someone who refuses to meet it halfway. Still, walking away felt cruel. They couldn't stand the thought of being the reason someone else hurt. So, they stayed. They made excuses for others, took the blame, softened every sharp edge but their own. Their heart became an open door in a storm, and soon everything they had inside was soaked and shivering. Their softness began to feel like a trap. The same traits they once saw as beautiful, understanding, forgiving, gentle, were now being used against them. People learned that they would always forgive, always come back, always say it's fine. So they did, again and again. It's strange how quiet heartbreak can be when it happens slowly. No explosions, no shouting, just small pieces of yourself given away until one day you look down and realize there's almost nothing left. They started to feel hollow, not sad exactly, just empty, like the warmth had drained out of their chest and left only smoke. But even then, they didn't grow bitter. Not yet. They still believed in the goodness of people, even those who kept hurting them. They still thought love was supposed to hurt a little. That caring deeply meant losing a piece of yourself in the process. They didn't understand that real love doesn't demand your suffering, it nurtures your strength. And somewhere deep down, a quiet voice began to whisper. It wasn't loud or angry. It was patient, almost sad. It said, "You can be kind without being a doormat. You can forgive without returning. You can love without destroying yourself." They didn't fully believe that voice yet, but they felt it. Like a flicker under all the exhaustion, a spark of truth waiting to grow. The sweetness that once burned would one day harden into clarity. But for now, they were still learning the hardest truth of all. Not everyone deserves the softness you give so freely. And not every heart that hurts needs to be healed by yours. They never said it out loud, but deep down, they were waiting for someone to see them. Not the version that smiled and listened, not the calm one who always understood, but the tired, unseen part beneath all that light. The one who wanted just once to be the one held instead of holding. To be the one comforted instead of the comforter. That longing sat quietly beneath their kindness, like a secret ache they didn't want to admit existed. They told themselves they didn't need much, that being there for others was enough, that love didn't have to be returned to be real. But even the strongest hearts crave reflection. Even the most giving souls want to be understood. There were nights when they'd lie awake, replaying all the times they'd shown up for people who disappeared when the roles reversed. They would never say it, but it hurt to realize how few stayed when they were the ones falling apart. They began to notice the pattern. They were everyone's safe space, but no one's priority. People came to them for warmth, for listening, for relief, but not for love. They were the pause between storms, not the home someone built their peace in. And that truth left a hollow space in their chest that no amount of kindness could fill. Sometimes, they'd imagine someone looking at them the way they looked at others, with patience, depth, and care. Someone who wouldn't just take their empathy, but return it. Someone who would say, "You don't have to be strong right now. I've got you." But those words never came. The world seemed full of mouths that needed feeding, and hands that reached only when they were empty. And so they learned to hide their hunger behind more giving. They thought if they gave just a little more, if they loved harder, forgave faster, understood deeper, then maybe someone would finally stay. But love born from emptiness always leads back to the same silence. No one can fill what they don't see. It wasn't bitterness that grew in them, it was quiet disappointment, a realization that for all their care, they had never really been known. People loved how they made them feel, not who they were. And that difference was everything. Still, they kept loving, because it was who they were. But now, there was a slight hesitation in their touch, a softer tone in their voice when they said, "It's okay." The heart was still open, but not as wide. The light was still warm, but flickering. They didn't know it yet, but this hunger, the deep, unspoken ache to be seen, was the seed of their awakening. Because, sooner or later, every empath reaches the moment when they stop searching for someone to understand them, and instead, they turn inward and begin to finally see themselves. It's strange how we're drawn to the very things that hurt us. They didn't realize it at first, but the people who entered their life all seemed to carry the same kind of emptiness, the kind they recognized, the kind they thought they could heal. The faces changed, but the story stayed the same. Each one arrived with broken pieces, and the empath, with their open heart, reached out to hold them together. It felt noble. It felt right. But slowly, painfully, they began to notice a pattern. Every time they tried to save someone, they ended up losing a part of themselves. These people never meant to destroy them. Not really. They were just desperate for warmth. And the empath had plenty to give. But the warmth wasn't endless. Each conversation that started with, "You're the only one who understands me," ended with silence, once they no longer needed saving. The empath's heart became a revolving door for the lost and the lonely. They would pour out comfort, reassurance, love, and when the person was whole enough to walk again, they left. They started to wonder why it kept happening, why they were always drawn to those who drained them. It wasn't random. It was reflection. The world was showing them their own wound, the one that whispered, "You only matter when you're fixing someone." Every relationship became a mirror, and in it, they saw their hidden belief that love had to be earned. So they kept giving. They gave to those who couldn't give back. They stayed with people who took until there was nothing left. They mistook pity for connection and chemistry for fate. Every time someone said, "I need you," it hit like music to their starving heart. And yet, beneath the melody, there was always a hum of dread, because deep down, they knew what would come next. Sometimes they would feel it happening in real time, that slow draining of their energy, that quiet fading of joy. They'd tell themselves this person was different, that this time it would be enough. But the same story always unfolded: softness met with selfishness, love met with taking, until finally they'd look at the person across from them and see not a partner, but a mirror. That's when the truth began to sting. The ones who hurt them weren't teaching them cruelty, they were teaching them boundaries. Every heartbreak was a reflection, asking them to stop rescuing, stop bleeding, stop confusing pain with purpose. The people they called lessons were, in a strange way, messengers showing them what happens when you give to everyone but yourself. They didn't hate those people, not even the ones who left them empty. They understood. Everyone's just trying to find warmth somewhere. But they were starting to see that real love doesn't demand you drown to keep someone else afloat. And the moment they understood that, something inside them shifted. The mirror that once showed pain was beginning to show truth. It didn't happen all at once. There was no clear moment when everything broke. It was more like a slow leak, something inside them quietly draining day after day, until one morning they woke up and realized they felt nothing at all. The care that once came so naturally now felt heavy, forced. Their kindness had turned into muscle memory, an automatic reflex rather than a genuine feeling. They still smiled, still said the right things, still played the part, but behind their eyes, something had gone dim. They used to feel everything deeply, but now even sadness seemed far away, like it belonged to someone else. They'd listen to a friend cry, nod at the right moments, say all the comforting words, and yet, inside, it felt hollow. The warmth that used to fill those moments was gone. They had given so much of themselves to others that there was nothing left to give from. It was like trying to pour from an empty cup and pretending it wasn't cracked. They began to notice how much of their life was built on pretending they weren't tired, pretending they didn't need help, pretending they still cared as much as they used to. But deep down, they were running on the memory of their old self, the one who believed in endless giving, in love without limits. That version of them had vanished quietly, somewhere between all the late-night talks, the held space, the forgivenesses that no one ever earned. At first, they blamed themselves. Maybe they were just becoming cold. Maybe something was wrong with them. They missed their softness, the way they used to feel connected to everyone. But the truth was simpler and sadder. They were burned out on being human. The weight of everyone's emotions had crushed their ability to feel their own. Even joy started to feel suspicious. When something good happened, they didn't trust it to last. When someone praised them, it didn't sink in. Compliments slid off their skin like water off glass. They didn't even know what real happiness felt like anymore. It had been replaced by relief, the kind that comes from moments of silence between the noise of other people's needs. Sometimes they'd catch their reflection and hardly recognize it. The smile looked right, but the eyes were tired. Not just physically tired, but soul tired. The kind of fatigue that no sleep could fix. They wondered when kindness had started to feel like a job, when love had turned into labor. And yet, even in the emptiness, something inside them was watching quietly, patiently. The part of them that still remembered what truth felt like. It knew this collapse wasn't the end. It was a breaking open, a necessary fall so something real could grow again. But in that moment, they couldn't see it. All they knew was that the mask no longer fit, and the smile that once healed others had finally stopped healing them. It didn't end with a fight. There was no explosion, no words thrown like knives. Just silence, the kind that feels too big for a room. They woke one morning and felt it immediately. Something had changed. The world looked the same, but they didn't. The usual pull to check on people, to send that kind message, to fix what was broken, it was gone. It wasn't rebellion or anger, it was absence. like a flame that had quietly burned itself out in the night. They sat there for a while, staring at nothing, waiting for the old feeling to return. It didn't. The warmth that had always been their identity, the compassion, the constant reaching felt far away now, like a dream they couldn't fully remember. For the first time in their life, they didn't want to save anyone. They didn't want to listen, to explain, or to carry what wasn't theirs. They just wanted stillness. People around them noticed the shift, though no one could name it. "You've changed," they said, half worried, half accusing. They didn't understand that this wasn't bitterness, it was exhaustion. You can't pour endlessly without cracking somewhere. And cracks don't announce themselves with noise. They appear quietly, in the spaces where you've been strong for too long. They moved slower now, spoke less. Things that used to make them rush with empathy, tears, anger, chaos, now met them with quiet, not because they didn't care, but because they finally understood that not every fire was theirs to put out. That realization didn't feel empowering at first. It felt strange, empty even, like losing a part of yourself you thought would always be there. At night, they felt that emptiness stretch wider. It wasn't loneliness exactly, it was clarity. The silence around them no longer felt like punishment. It felt like truth. All their life they had filled every quiet space with someone else's story, someone else's pain. Now, the only story left was their own. And for once, they didn't run from it. Sometimes they'd feel a pang of guilt for pulling back, like they were doing something wrong by not giving as much. But deep down, something in them whispered, "This is what healing sounds like." It's not always loud or bright. Sometimes it's the sound of your heart no longer racing to fix what's broken. Sometimes it's the peace of finally letting silence answer instead of you. So they let it be quiet. They stopped forcing the light, stopped trying to be the warmth in every room. The world didn't end. The people who truly cared stayed. The ones who only came for the glow drifted away as quietly as they had appeared. It wasn't a grand transformation, it was the smallest shift, the softest breaking, but it was real. Something in them had cracked, yes, but in the space where the warmth had faded, something new was forming. Not another mask, not another role, just the still, unfamiliar beginning of themselves. It happens quietly, like the first frost after autumn. One day they just stop. Stop explaining themselves to people who never listened. Stop reaching out to those who only took. Stop patching up every broken thing that was never theirs to fix. It isn't anger, it's surrender. Not to others, but to truth. They've finally realized that constant giving isn't kindness when it empties you. So they withdraw, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. At first it feels unnatural. The silence they used to fill with comfort now stretches out around them, wide and still. They don't rush to reply to messages, don't chase conversations that no longer feel alive. They let things fall, and they don't rush to catch them. The world, confused by the change, calls it coldness. They call it peace. They begin to notice how much noise they used to live in, the endless emotions, the drama, the fixing. It was all so constant that they never heard their own thoughts. Now, in this strange quiet, their mind begins to breathe again. It's uncomfortable at first. The silence feels sharp, like standing barefoot in snow. But over time, the chill starts to feel clean, honest. People start to pull away, unsure of how to handle the new stillness. They say things like, "You're not yourself lately," or "You've changed." And they have. For the first time, they're no longer performing warmth to make others comfortable. They've realized they don't have to explain why they're tired or why they've gone quiet. Some things don't need explanations, they need endings. There's a certain beauty in this retreat. The world looks different when you stop trying to control it. The chaos keeps spinning, but it no longer pulls them in. They can watch without absorbing, listen without losing themselves. It's not indifference, it's clarity. The same heart that once broke over everyone else's pain now beats with a strange new strength. A kind of stillness that isn't numb, but aware. There are lonely days, of course. Nights when they wonder if maybe they went too far. If maybe closing off was the wrong kind of protection. But then they remember the exhaustion that lived inside them, before the bone-deep tiredness of always being available, always caring, always bleeding for others. Compared to that, this solitude feels sacred. They start to realize that withdrawal isn't the opposite of love. It's love redirected. Love finally turned inward. The same compassion they gave so freely to others is now being used to rebuild themselves. It's quiet work, invisible even to those closest to them, but it's real. This is the winter of their soul, a season of rest, a necessary freezing of old patterns. Everything looks bare, silent, still, but beneath the surface something is stirring, something pure, something honest. The thaw will come one day, but for now, they let the cold do its work. They're learning that even in silence, even in solitude, they are still alive, and that for the first time is enough. It's an unsettling thing to realize that even your kindness can have a shadow. For so long they believed their empathy was pure, untouched by ego or need. Helping others made them feel whole, alive, meaningful. But now, in the stillness of their withdrawal, truth begins to whisper from beneath the silence. They start to see it clearly, the quiet hunger behind their endless saving. The truth that some of their compassion wasn't just about love, it was about control, about trying to fix others so they wouldn't have to face their own pain. It wasn't manipulation in the usual sense. They never wanted power over anyone, but helping had always given them something, a sense of purpose, a reason to exist. When someone was broken, they knew what to do. When someone needed saving, they felt needed. And in that need, they didn't have to look at their own emptiness. They could focus outward, endlessly healing others so they wouldn't have to heal themselves. Now, without people to save, they feel it, the ache of their own wounds rising to the surface, the loneliness they buried under other people's problems, the sadness they disguised as compassion. It's uncomfortable to admit, almost shameful, that their empathy sometimes came from avoidance, that their saving wasn't always selfless. But honesty has a strange kind of mercy. When you stop pretending, even your flaws become teachers. They begin to remember all the times they tried to rescue someone who didn't want to change. The times they poured themselves into people who resisted every ounce of light they offered. They used to call it loyalty, love, devotion. But now it feels different. It feels like trying to rewrite their own story through someone else's healing, as if fixing them could finally fix the part of themselves that still ached. The rescuer archetype starts to crumble. They see how it kept them trapped, always busy, always distracted, always focused on everyone else. It gave them a sense of safety, because it meant they never had to sit still long enough to face their own pain. But now, without anyone left to save, the mirror turns inward, and what it shows isn't pretty. It's raw, human, unfinished, but it's real. They start to understand that love without boundaries isn't love, it's fear, wearing a mask of kindness. That sometimes the impulse to heal everyone is really a way to avoid the mess within, and that's okay. There's no shame in it. It's just the shadow of empathy. The side no one talks about, the one that clings to pain because it feels like purpose. So they stop trying to save the world for a while. They let the urge to fix things go quiet. They sit in the discomfort of not helping, not rescuing, not being needed. It's hard. It feels like losing their identity. But beneath that loss, something softer begins to emerge, a new kind of compassion. One that doesn't come from guilt or control, but from truth. And for the first time, they start to see that maybe the person who most needed saving was them all along. For the first time in their life, they stop running towards someone else's pain and turn around to face their own. It's unfamiliar terrain, quiet, uncomfortable, and heavier than they expected. They used to think they were strong because they could carry everyone else's sadness. But now, Sitting alone with their own, they realize how much of their strength was distraction. Helping others had always been easier than helping themselves. The silence feels different now. It's not peaceful like before. It's sharp. Every thought, every memory, every moment they ignored for the sake of someone else starts to surface. They see the times they were overlooked, dismissed, abandoned, the times they smiled through rejection, pretending it didn't hurt. They see the little child inside them who learned early that love meant effort, that to be cared for, you had to earn it. That wound never went away, it just grew up wearing kindness as armor. For years, they thought compassion made them whole. But now they see it was also their escape. Every time they rushed to fix someone, they were avoiding the truth that they were the one who felt broken. They were drawn to pain because it mirrored their own, though they never realized it. When others cried, they heard the echo of their own silence. When others needed saving, they were really trying to save the forgotten parts of themselves. Facing that truth hurts. There's no gentle way around it. It feels like standing in front of a mirror that doesn't flatter or lie. The reflection is raw, tired eyes, old wounds, unspoken grief. But as painful as it is, it's also freeing. They don't have to pretend anymore. They don't have to keep proving their worth through kindness. The wound beneath the kindness, the ache of never being chosen, never being fully seen, is finally being felt. And feeling it is the beginning of healing it. Some nights, the tears come without reason. They don't fight them anymore. They let them fall, quietly, without shame. Each one feels like a small release, a letting go of years spent holding everything in. It's not weakness, it's honesty. And honesty feels different than the old kind of strength. It doesn't look heroic, it looks human. In that stillness, they start to realize something. Pain isn't the enemy. Avoiding it was. All their life they believed that feeling their own sadness would destroy them. But the opposite is happening. The more they sit with it, the lighter they become. It's as if every uncried tear is slowly melting away the numbness that used to cover their heart. They begin to see that healing isn't about never hurting again. It's about learning to face the hurt without losing yourself. About letting the pain be seen, heard, and finally understood. And as they sit there, in the quiet, no longer hiding behind compassion or pretending to be okay, something soft begins to rise within them, a calm, unfamiliar kind of love. Not for others this time, but for themselves. There comes a moment when they realize they can't go back. The part of them that lived for everyone else has reached its end. It doesn't die with noise or struggle, it fades, quietly, like smoke after a fire. For so long, that part of them was their identity, the helper, the listener, the one who always stayed. But now, standing in the ruins of their old patterns, they can feel it slipping away. The caretaker is dying, and though it's painful, it also feels strangely right. It's not dramatic. It's more like a slow unbinding. The habits that once defined them, checking in on everyone, holding things together, making sure no one was upset, start to lose their grip. They try to act the same, but it feels forced, unnatural, like wearing clothes that no longer fit. The instinct to fix and please still flickers inside them, but every time they reach for it, something deep within whispers, not anymore. At first, the emptiness feels unbearable. Without the caretaker, who are they? If they're not the one holding everyone else together, what's left? The silence feels too big. The stillness feels wrong. Their purpose used to come from being needed, and now that purpose is gone. There's a strange kind of grief in that, the grief of losing a self that was built entirely around others. But as they sit in that emptiness, something unexpected happens. Beneath the loneliness, beneath the fear, there's a quiet sense of space. It's unsettling at first, but also pure. For the first time, there's room for breath, for truth, for something new to grow. The caretaker had been loud in its quiet way, always busy, always managing emotions, always smoothing chaos. Now there's only stillness, and in that stillness, they begin to hear themselves again. They start to see that the caretaker wasn't evil or wrong, it was a survival instinct. It was the part of them that believed love had to be earned, that peace was only real if everyone else was okay. But that version of love was too small for the person they were becoming. So it had to die, and its death is sacred. It's the shedding of something false, a return to something real. They mourn it, of course. There are moments when they miss it, the comfort of being needed, the familiarity of putting others first. But each time the old self tries to return, it feels heavier, like carrying a body that no longer belongs to them. The world may not notice this death, but inside, it's the biggest transformation they've ever lived through. Eventually, the grief begins to soften. The silence starts to feel less like a void and more like freedom. They realize that what died wasn't their kindness, it was their compulsion. What ended wasn't their ability to love, it was their need to disappear to prove it. The caretaker is gone, but what remains is truer. A self that no longer lives for others, but finally, quietly, begins to live for itself. It starts with a single word: small, quiet, almost unfamiliar on their tongue. No. At first, it feels wrong to say it. Their whole life, they've been built around yes, yes, I can help, yes, it's fine, yes, I understand. But now, something in them refuses to keep breaking for the sake of others. The collapse that once felt like the end becomes the soil for something new. And from that soil, boundaries begin to grow. They start small, saying no to a conversation that feels draining, choosing not to reply to someone who only reaches out when they need something, leaving a room when the energy turns sharp. At first, the guilt hits hard, like a reflex they can't unlearn. They feel selfish for choosing peace, disloyal for walking away. But the more they practice, the more they realize that protecting themselves isn't cruelty, it's honesty. They notice how quiet the world becomes when you stop overgiving. Some people don't like the new version of them, the one who no longer apologizes for needing space. The ones who benefited from their endless yeses start to pull away, calling them distant or cold. But they don't chase anymore. They're learning that real connection doesn't demand self-sacrifice. It respects silence. It understands space. Each no becomes a small act of freedom. Each boundary a line drawn in love, not against others, but for themselves. It's strange, this new way of being. For so long, they believed peace was something they created outside of themselves. Now they see it's something they protect within. And the more they protect it, the stronger it grows. They begin to understand that boundaries aren't walls, they're gates. Gates that decide what comes in, what stays, and what must leave. It's not about shutting people out, but about keeping their soul safe enough to stay open. They used to think love meant giving everything, but now they see that real love has edges. It breathes through balance. It thrives in respect. Sometimes they still feel the old pull to comfort, to explain, to fix. But they pause, they breathe. They ask themselves, is this love or is this fear? Most of the time, the answer is clear. And slowly, compassion becomes something conscious. Not a reflex that drains them, but a choice that honors them. They start to feel different inside, lighter, but also grounded. The endless reaching fades, replaced by calm presence. There's power in knowing they can care deeply without losing themselves in the process. Power in being gentle without being small. Not everyone understands the change. Some people fall away completely, unable to meet the new energy. It hurts, but it also feels clean, like a wound finally healing instead of being reopened. The emptiness left behind doesn't ache the way it used to. It feels like peace. This is the birth of boundaries. Not a rebellion, but a rebirth. A quiet claiming of the self they lost long ago. The caretaker is gone, and in their place stands something stronger, a soul that still loves, but finally loves itself too. It feels different now, the fire inside them. It's not the same soft glow that once burned, just to keep others warm. This flame is colder, clearer, more controlled. It doesn't flicker wildly for every passing emotion. It doesn't bend toward every cry for attention. It stands steady, calm, deliberate. Their empathy hasn't disappeared. It's transformed. What once drained them now gives them power. They start to notice how much they used to confuse feeling with responsibility. Every sad face, every hurt tone, every sigh used to pull them in. They felt like it was their job to fix what others refused to face. But now, their heart doesn't rush forward so quickly. They can still feel everything, but they don't absorb it anymore. It's as if their empathy has grown eyes. It can see, but it no longer bleeds. People notice the difference. Some say they've gone cold. Maybe they have, in a way, but it's not cruelty. It's clarity. They've learned that compassion, without boundaries, becomes self-destruction. That understanding someone doesn't mean accepting their chaos. The world taught them to equate softness with goodness. But now they see that true goodness sometimes looks sharp. It says no. It walks away. It protects what's sacred. Their silence feels different now, too. It's not the silence of exhaustion, but of control. When someone tries to provoke them, they no longer explain or defend. They simply look, see, and stay still. They can read manipulation in tone, see selfishness behind charm, sense insincerity in kindness. Their awareness has become a kind of light that burns quietly. What once blinded them now illuminates everything. There's strength in this coolness, a peace that doesn't depend on approval. They don't rush to comfort those who hurt them. They don't feel guilty for choosing distance. They understand now that not every storm deserves their shelter. And strangely, this detachment doesn't make them less loving. It makes their love more honest. They can give without losing, care without collapsing. Sometimes they miss the old warmth, the kind that made them feel connected to everyone. But when they look back, they remember the exhaustion that came with it, the ache of carrying pain that wasn't theirs. This new fire is different. It doesn't seek to please, it seeks to see. It doesn't ask, how can I fix this? But is this mine to carry? That question alone has changed everything. The world still tries to test them, of course. Old patterns knock at the door, disguised as new faces. But each time, the cold flame inside burns steady. It knows what it's worth. It knows what it will no longer allow. This isn't numbness. It's evolution. The heart still beats, still feels, but it beats for truth now, not validation. The cold flame doesn't melt or bend. It illuminates. And in its quiet glow, they realize something powerful. They haven't lost their empathy. They've refined it into wisdom. They used to believe that love meant constant explanation, that to keep peace, they had to make others understand why they were hurt, why they needed space, why they couldn't keep giving. They thought silence was cruelty, that distance was punishment. But now they see it differently. They've learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say nothing at all. Silence, when it comes from clarity, isn't weakness. It's strength, disguised as stillness. They no longer chase closure. They no longer write long messages trying to prove their point or soften their truth. When something feels wrong, they simply step back. No drama, no speeches. Just distance. The people who once fed off their constant attention don't understand it. They call it cold, accuse them of being heartless. But what they're really seeing is power, the kind that doesn't need to fight to win. Withdrawal used to feel like loss, but now it feels like protection. There's a strange peace in not reacting, in watching the storm from a distance instead of walking straight into it. They realize that not every argument deserves a response. Not every misunderstanding needs correcting. Some things collapse naturally when you stop holding them up. Their silence becomes their boundary. It's not a wall, but a mirror. Those who respect it stay. Those who don't reveal themselves. The ones who truly care will sense the shift and meet them halfway. The ones who only took from them will fade into the noise where they always belong. There's power in that kind of absence, one that speaks louder than words ever could. It's not revenge, it's restoration. Every time they stay quiet instead of defending their worth, their energy returns to them. Every time they choose peace over proving a point, they get stronger. The silence that once felt heavy now feels clean. They begin to see how much of their old self was built around over-explaining. How many times they tried to make others see their heart, hoping it would earn understanding. But truth doesn't need convincing. It just is. And now, instead of explaining who they are, they simply embody it. The right people will recognize it. The rest never mattered. There are moments, of course, when the old urge returns to fix, to explain, to make it right. But they've learned to breathe through it, to let the moment pass. Silence doesn't mean indifference. It means peace has finally become more important than control. So they stop trying to prove their goodness through words. They let their absence speak. It doesn't shout. It echoes. And in that echo, something powerful happens. People start to feel the weight of what they lost when they lost their access. They used to fear being misunderstood. Now they realize that misunderstanding is a small price to pay for freedom. Silence isn't empty anymore. It's full of power, of peace, of self. And in that stillness, they finally understand. Sometimes saying nothing changes everything. Distance used to scare them. It felt like losing connection, like stepping away from the warmth that made life meaningful. But now, something has changed. What once felt like emptiness has become space clean, wide, and sacred. They used to think that caring deeply meant carrying everything, but now they see it differently. True empathy isn't about absorbing, it's about understanding without drowning. They begin to notice how calm feels. Not the forced calm of pretending everything is okay, but the real kind. The kind that stays steady even when the world around them isn't. They can listen to someone's pain without feeling it become their own. They can see through sadness, anger, and chaos without being swept into it. Their heart still feels deeply, maybe even more than before, but it no longer leaks energy through every open door. Their sensitivity has become precision. This distance doesn't mean disconnection. It means control. It means knowing that they can love without losing themselves in the process. They can walk beside someone through their storm and still keep their own sky clear. That's a kind of mastery few understand. The people who used to drain them start to lose their power, their words, their moods, their chaos. They no longer enter so easily. It's not that the empath stopped caring. It's that they finally learned how to care correctly. They understand that compassion doesn't mean self-sacrifice. It means presence with boundaries, love with awareness, warmth with wisdom. It feels different now when they walk away. Before, it came with guilt and second-guessing. Now, it comes with peace. They no longer feel the need to fix or explain. They've learned to trust their instincts. The quiet knowing that says, "This energy is not mine." And each time they honor that knowing, they grow stronger. Even their sadness feels different. It's no longer chaos, it's clarity. They can feel grief without letting it define them. They can feel others' pain without confusing it with their own. It's as if the distance has turned their emotions into light, something that illuminates instead of burns. There's power in this balance. The old version of them loved without limits and paid for it with exhaustion. The new version still loves, but with awareness. They no longer need to prove their goodness through suffering. They no longer see empathy as a wound. It's a gift now, one they finally know how to use. Sometimes they think back to the person they used to be, the one who felt everything too deeply, who mistook chaos for connection. They don't resent that version. That version had to exist for this one to be born. The distance they once feared was never isolation, it was transformation. They've learned the quiet art of emotional alchemy, turning pain into perception, sensitivity into strength, empathy into discernment. And in that balance between feeling and protecting, they finally found what they were always searching for: peace. That doesn't depend on anyone else's storm. When they finally see the people who once drained them, it feels strange. There's no anger left, no trembling heart, no need to prove anything, just calm. The kind of calm that makes others uneasy. The same people who once thrived on their reactions now face silence, a mirror that reflects everything back but gives nothing in return. It's not revenge, it's balance. The empath who once absorbed every emotion has become untouchable. They listen to the same words that used to cut deep, and nothing moves inside them. It's not numbness, it's clarity. They can see manipulation now, not as mystery, but as pattern. They can see guilt trips for what they are, apologies that mean nothing, flattery meant to regain control. Where they once would have explained, defended, or soothed, they now simply watch. The mirror doesn't argue. It just shows truth. Their calmness unsettles people who were used to feeding on their emotions. The ones who once provoked them now grow frustrated by the silence. The lack of reaction feels like rejection, and in a way, it is but a quiet one. A rejection of chaos. A refusal to play a part in someone else's storm. The empath no longer fuels what drains them. They've learned that not everything deserves a response, and that some forms of power speak best through stillness. It's not that they stopped feeling, they still feel everything, but they've learned to hold emotion without letting it control them. The old self would have panicked in this kind of confrontation, desperate to fix things, desperate to be understood. The new self doesn't need to be understood. They've realized that peace doesn't require permission. The people who used to test their patience start to reveal themselves in new ways. Without the empath's energy to absorb, their chaos echoes back empty. The manipulator loses control. The critic loses impact. The victim loses an audience. The mirror shows everyone exactly who they are, and it's unsettling for those who built power on reaction. But this calm isn't coldness born from hate. It's born from wisdom. They've realized that reacting to everything is a form of surrender, that each emotional reaction is an invitation for others to keep pulling you out of yourself. Now, they stand centered, unshaken. It's not about being above anyone. It's about finally being within themselves. The silence that once felt lonely now feels sacred. It's their protection, their boundary, their truth. They no longer seek closure from others because they've found it within. When they walk away, they do it quietly, not to prove a point, but to preserve their energy. For the first time, they understand real strength isn't loud or emotional. It's calm, focused, and deeply still. The world may call it coldness, but it's not. It's peace that no one can steal anymore. They've become the frozen mirror, clear, reflective, untouchable. And in that still reflection, they finally see the truth. They don't need to fight for peace when they've already become it. There comes a moment when they stop asking for permission to exist as they are. It's subtle, almost invisible from the outside. But inside, it feels like standing taller after being hunched for years. For so long, they lived in apology. Sorry for being too quiet, too intense, too sensitive, too much. Every time someone frowned at their depth or pulled away from their honesty, they shrank a little more. But now, they no longer bend. What returns to them isn't arrogance, it's dignity, the quiet power of being unmoved. They no longer need to explain why they are the way they are. They used to rewrite themselves to fit the comfort of others, speaking softer, smiling when they didn't mean it, pretending not to see what they saw. Now, when someone tries to make them small, they simply don't shrink. They've learned that peace built on self-erasure isn't peace at all. It's control, disguised as love, and they're done living that way. Their worth used to depend on harmony. If everyone around them was calm, they felt safe. If someone was angry, they blamed themselves. But that old equation has broken. They finally see that their value doesn't rise or fall with anyone else's emotions. They can sit in someone's disapproval, and not crumble. They can walk away from misunderstanding and not explain. The silence that once frightened them now feels like a declaration. I don't need to be accepted to exist in truth. It's not defiance, it's respect. For themselves, for the energy they give, the time they offer, the peace they protect. They no longer trade these things for affection. They no longer bleed just to prove they care. The more they honor their boundaries, the more they begin to feel whole again. Each time they say no without guilt, each time they stay still while someone tries to shake them, their self-respect roots deeper. There's a calm that comes from no longer chasing understanding. They've realized that not everyone will see their intentions, and that's okay. They don't have to justify kindness that isn't returned, or softness that's been misunderstood. They can be both gentle and firm, both open and untouchable. That balance, once impossible, now feels natural. Sometimes people call it pride, or even coldness. But what it really is balance. They finally treat themselves with the same compassion they use to give everyone else. They speak to themselves with care. They forgive their old self for staying too long, for giving too much, for not knowing better. There's no bitterness left, only understanding. And in that understanding they rise not loudly, not to prove anything, but quietly, like sunlight slipping through clouds. They've remembered who they are beneath the pleasing and performing. Someone strong, someone worthy, someone who no longer confuses humility with self-abandonment. They stand now in the stillness of their own respect, no longer seeking permission, no longer apologizing for their depth. They've stopped trying to be what others need and started becoming who they were always meant to be. They don't fight the way they used to. There are no raised voices, no desperate explanations, no burning need to prove who they are. The battles that once consumed them, trying to be understood, trying to be enough, trying to be seen, no longer hold power. They've learned that true strength doesn't shout. It stands still, quiet, unmoved. They've become something different now, something rare, a still warrior. It's not that they've stopped caring. They still feel deeply, still notice everything, still love with quiet intensity. But their compassion has changed shape. It no longer bends them, it grounds them. When people lash out, they no longer react. When someone tries to pull them into chaos, they stay centered. Their calmness is not a wall, it's armor. And it's built not from anger, but from understanding. They used to think calm meant weak, that staying silent meant surrender. But now they know the truth. Stillness is strength in its purest form. The world runs on noise, arguments, opinions, reactions, but silence has its own kind of power. A power that doesn't need to prove, doesn't need to convince. It just is. When someone crosses their boundaries now, they don't explain why it was wrong. They don't argue. They don't plead. They simply remove their presence. That absence speaks louder than any lecture ever could. Their peace has become non-negotiable. Their kindness, deliberate. Every word they give now has weight, because it's no longer scattered, trying to fix the unfixable. People sense it, the difference in their energy. The same softness is there, but it's sharper now, focused. It's not the kind of love that says, I'll save you. It's the kind that says, I believe you can save yourself. They no longer confuse empathy with responsibility. Their compassion still flows, but it flows with direction. It doesn't spill everywhere. It knows where to stop. They've learned to see through people's noise, the manipulation, the guilt, the emotional games. It doesn't surprise them anymore. They don't need to expose it or react to it. They just see it. And in seeing, it loses its power. That's what awareness does. It disarms without effort. Their presence alone carries authority now. It's not fear they inspire, but respect. The kind that comes from someone who knows themselves deeply, who can't be swayed by flattery or provoked by anger. They've become the kind of calm that can't be faked. The kind that comes only after breaking, rebuilding, and choosing peace over pride. They no longer chase light, they are it. Not the fragile, burning kind that flickers for attention, but the steady kind that guides silently. They have nothing to prove, nothing to defend, nothing to lose by walking away. The still warrior doesn't fight to win. They fight only when it matters, and most battles now are fought within. Their strength is quiet, their compassion firm. They are not cruel, just calm. Not detached, just awake. And for the first time, their peace is not fragile. It's power. There was a time when saying no felt impossible. It felt like betrayal, like closing a door on love. They used to think kindness meant always saying yes, yes to helping, yes to listening, yes to giving, even when it hurt. But every yes that betrayed their peace left a quiet scar. It took years of exhaustion to learn that love without limits isn't love, it's self-abandonment, dressed as care. Now, they are learning the art of refusal, not out of anger, but out of wisdom. The first no is the hardest. It trembles on their lips, heavy with guilt. Their whole life has been built around being available, agreeable, good. But as the word leaves their mouth, something strange happens. Instead of guilt, there's relief. The air feels clearer, their chest lighter. That small, sacred word doesn't destroy connection, it saves it. It draws a line between giving and disappearing. They start to see that every no is a kind of prayer, not a rejection of others, but a promise to themselves. Each time they say no to something that drains them, they say yes to their own soul. They say yes to rest, yes to clarity, yes to peace. The guilt still lingers at times, old habits, whispering that they're selfish, but they breathe through it. They remind themselves that preservation isn't selfishness, it's self-respect. People react differently to this new version of them. Some grow distant, uncomfortable with boundaries they can't bend. Others adjust, learning to meet them in truth rather than need. And slowly, the right people start to stay, the ones who see their no as strength, not rejection. These are the ones who understand that love thrives where freedom exists. They realize now that love that costs you your peace isn't love, it's a bargain. It's giving away the very thing that makes love real, the ability to choose. They used to confuse being needed with being loved. Now they know that love doesn't demand exhaustion. It doesn't silence you or shrink you. It honors you. Their no becomes gentle but firm. It doesn't come from walls or anger. It comes from clarity, from knowing their limits and guarding them with quiet devotion. They don't explain it anymore. They simply offer it with grace, understanding that people who truly love them will never ask them to break themselves to prove it. It's a strange kind of freedom, this ability to refuse without guilt. They feel more present now, more alive. Their yeses carry more meaning because they're no longer automatic. They come from choice, not fear. From love, not obligation. They begin to realize that boundaries are sacred, not because they keep people out, but because they keep their soul whole. Every no is a way of saying, I matter too. And with each one, their spirit grows steadier, their heart quieter, their love purer. In the end, the sacred no isn't about rejection, it's about alignment. It's the sound of someone finally remembering that peace is their first form of love. It's a strange kind of power, the ability to see through things. Once, they were blind to people's masks. They took words at face value, mistook charm for kindness, and confusion for depth. But now, something inside them has shifted. Their empathy has become sharper, clearer, quieter. It no longer pulls them into others' storms, it simply sees. They can look at someone and feel the truth beneath the surface, the hidden motives wrapped in gentle tones, the wounds disguised as pride. What used to overwhelm them now only informs them. They no longer drown in emotion, they navigate it. They begin to understand that awareness is not the same as judgment. To see through someone doesn't mean to condemn them. It means to understand their patterns without getting caught in them. They can see the manipulation in someone's kindness, the insecurity in someone's anger, the longing behind someone's cruelty. And instead of reacting, they stay still. Their silence becomes insight. Their calm becomes protection. The gift of empathy, once a curse, has turned into vision. They can see both the light and the shadow in others, and they no longer confuse one for the other. When someone tries to guilt them, they recognize it as fear. When someone lies, they see the pain underneath the mask. When someone tries to use their kindness, they sense it instantly, but they no longer feel the need to fix or fight. Awareness alone is enough. They used to seek validation for what they felt. They'd explain their intuition, hoping others would believe them. Now, they don't need proof. They trust what their body knows, what their silence tells them. Their awareness has become its own compass, steady and sure. It doesn't make them cynical, it makes them clear. The world hasn't changed, but their way of seeing it has. They no longer romanticize people's potential or make excuses for their behavior. They see people as they are, not as they could be, and still manage to care. That's the difference. Their heart hasn't hardened, it's just learned discernment. They can love someone fully and still walk away when the love becomes heavy. They can listen with compassion but not confusion. People sense it. They feel the depth in their gaze, the way it sees without speaking, understands without asking. Some find it comforting, others find it uncomfortable. Those who rely on illusion feel exposed around them, because you can't perform in front of someone who sees the truth. This vision isn't loud or dramatic. It's subtle, effortless, almost invisible, but it changes everything. They move through the world with quiet confidence, no longer searching for who to trust or what to believe. They know now that truth always reveals itself. It just requires stillness to notice. They become something rare, a person who feels deeply yet remains unshaken. They can stand in front of darkness and not be pulled in, look at pain and not become it. Their empathy has evolved into wisdom, and their wisdom into sight. And through those eyes that see through everything, they finally see themselves clear, whole, awake. They find themselves walking alone again, but this time, it doesn't ache. The quiet that once pressed against their chest now feels like air, like freedom. What used to be loneliness has turned into something sacred. It's not isolation anymore, it's sovereignty. They used to fill silence with people, noise, distractions, anything to escape the echo of their own thoughts. Now, they welcome it. They've made peace with being their own company. There's a stillness to their days that feels royal, not grand or loud, but deeply steady. They no longer look for belonging in faces that can't see them. They've stopped trying to explain their solitude to those who mistake it for sadness. The truth is, being alone isn't empty when you've built peace inside yourself. The solitude that once haunted them has become their throne, and from it they see the world more clearly than ever. They move differently now, slower, more intentional. They don't rush to fill gaps or chase connection. When they speak, it's with purpose. When they love, it's with awareness. And when they are alone, they are not waiting, they are resting, recharging, returning to themselves. The power they once scattered across 100 people now lives quietly in their own chest. It's strange how solitude used to feel like punishment. There was a time when being alone meant something was wrong, like they weren't lovable enough, interesting enough, good enough. But now, solitude feels like choice. They understand that peace isn't found in company, it's found in clarity. When the noise of other people's expectations fades, their own voice grows loud enough to be heard. And that voice is calm, certain, unafraid. The world still pulls at them, of course. There are people who try to draw them back into old patterns, who mistake their stillness for distance, their silence for pride. But they no longer chase understanding. They no longer reach for what has already fallen away. Not out of arrogance, but because they finally see that not every connection is meant to last, and not every goodbye is a loss. Sometimes they miss the closeness of before, the feeling of belonging to something bigger. But then they remember how much of themselves they had to give up to feel that way. Now, they belong only to truth, and that feels better than any crowd ever did. There's a quiet strength that lives in them now, one that doesn't demand attention. They carry it in the way they walk, the way they breathe, the way they no longer react to noise. They've learned that power isn't loud or visible. It's the ability to remain at peace in a world that feeds on chaos. So they sit in their solitude, not lonely, but whole. Their silence is no longer a wound, it's a crown. And from that still, sacred place within, they finally understand. They were never meant to be rescued from being alone. They were meant to remember that peace was waiting for them there, all along. Their compassion feels different now. It's no longer the soft, endless giving that once left them drained. It's sharper, cleaner. What used to be an open flood of emotion has become a steady, focused stream. They still care deeply, but it's no longer the kind of care that costs them their peace. Their empathy has changed form. It's no longer sentimental. It's surgical. They know when to reach out and when to step back, when to comfort and when to confront. They've learned that true compassion isn't about making everyone feel better. It's about telling the truth, even when it stings. There was a time when they couldn't bear to disappoint anyone, when they mistook being kind for being agreeable. But now, they understand that love without honesty is just illusion. They can look someone in the eyes and say what needs to be said, not to wound, but to wake. Their presence has changed. People feel it. The same calm that once made others comfortable now makes them reflective. Around them, masks fall faster. Pretenses fade. Their compassion doesn't soothe lies anymore, it exposes them. They no longer enable weakness in the name of empathy. If they see someone hiding behind excuses, they hold up a mirror. If they sense manipulation, they stay silent and let the truth speak for itself. Their empathy has grown teeth, not to bite, but to protect. There's a quiet power in that kind of clarity. They no longer confuse helping with saving. They can hold space for someone's pain without trying to erase it. They've learned that growth doesn't happen through comfort alone, it happens through accountability. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is refuse to let someone stay small. Their compassion now carries that edge. It can cut through denial, through illusion, through the soft fog of avoidance that people use to stay asleep. They aren't cruel. They still care deeply. But now, their care has structure. Their kindness has backbone. They no longer say yes when they mean no. They no longer hide behind gentle words to avoid conflict. When something feels wrong, they address it not from anger, but from peace. Their calm truth hits harder than any outburst ever could. The people who truly want healing feel safe with them. The ones who only want comfort without change feel exposed. And that's okay. Their compassion was never meant to please everyone. It was meant to bring light, even if that light sometimes blinds before it illuminates. They've become the kind of person who can sit with someone's tears without being pulled under, who can speak truth without cruelty, who can love fiercely without losing themselves. Their empathy is no longer a weakness, it's a weapon of light. It can cut away lies, illusions, and old versions of themselves that no longer serve. This is the compassion that cuts not to harm, but to heal. It's the kind of love that frees, the kind that doesn't just soothe the wound, but removes what causes it. Compassion, once their burden, has become their power, and now they wield it with grace. It happens slowly, like winter giving way to spring. The edges inside them begin to thaw. The stillness that once protected them starts to feel spacious instead of cold. After all the years of carrying, collapsing, and rebuilding, something soft begins to bloom again, warmth. But this time, it's different. It's not the desperate warmth that once came from overgiving or needing to be needed. It's quiet, steady, and whole. It flows not from emptiness, but from fullness. They start to realize that strength and softness were never meant to fight each other. The coldness that once kept them safe wasn't wrong, it was healing. It taught them boundaries, clarity, self-respect. But now, that same strength makes it safe to open their heart again. They no longer give out of guilt or habit. They give because they choose to. because they want to. Love, once their weakness, has become their freedom. They laugh more now. It surprises them, the sound of it, how natural it feels after so long in silence. Their smile no longer hides exhaustion. It comes from peace. They can sit with people again, feel deeply, listen fully, and not lose themselves in the process. The same empathy that once drowned them now carries them gently. They've learned the art of balance, of caring deeply, while staying centered within their own calm. The people around them can feel the difference too. Their warmth doesn't come with the old heaviness. It's not a light that begs to be seen or a love that asks to be returned. It simply is radiant but grounded. They can say no without guilt, yes without fear, love without losing themselves. Their presence doesn't chase approval anymore. It invites honesty. Sometimes they think back to the version of themselves who loved so recklessly, who thought saving others was proof of worth. They don't hate that person. They honor them. That version had to exist to teach them what love isn't. Without the breaking, they wouldn't know this peace. Without the coldness, they wouldn't understand the warmth now spreading gently through their life. Love, they realize, was never meant to be martyrdom. It was meant to be shared between whole hearts, not traded for validation. Their warmth now carries wisdom. It knows when to stay and when to go, when to hold and when to release. It's not born from fear of being alone, it's born from joy in simply being. They walk through the world differently now. The light in them doesn't burn, it glows. It doesn't chase, it attracts. It doesn't demand, it offers. They've become the balance between the giver and the guardian, the heart and the boundary, the compassion and the clarity. And in that balance, they find something they had searched for all along. Love that doesn't cost them themselves. A warmth that doesn't melt their edges, but moves through them freely. The kind of love that isn't survival, but sanctuary. And this time, it feels like coming home. When they return to the world, everything looks the same, but feels entirely different. The noise that once overwhelmed them no longer reaches as deep. The chaos, the emotion, the endless pull of others' needs, they can see it all clearly now, yet they remain calm within it. It's as if life has slowed down, not in speed, but in meaning. They move through it with quiet awareness, no longer ruled by every feeling that passes through them. The heart that once ached from caring too much has awakened, and in its awakening, it has learned something powerful. Compassion was never meant to be suffering. It was meant to be strength. They walk softer now, but every step carries weight. Their empathy no longer drains them, it guides them. They can sit beside someone in pain without trying to fix it, offer love without losing energy, speak truth without fear. Their heart is still open, but it is no longer unguarded. It knows who to let in and when to walk away. This isn't coldness. It's wisdom wearing kindness as armor. They used to believe awakening meant detaching from the world, escaping its noise, its demands, its endless cycles of giving and taking. But now they see that real awakening doesn't pull you away from life. It roots you deeper in it. They no longer hide in solitude. They bring their solitude with them. The peace they found in stillness now travels wherever they go. People sense the change even if they can't explain it. There's something in their presence that feels both comforting and commanding. They no longer mirror the emotions around them. They reflect truth instead. When others lie, they see it. When others love, they feel it. When others hurt, they understand it without drowning in it. Their empathy has become vision. Their sensitivity transformed into strength. And yet, their warmth remains. Softer, wiser, quieter, but still there. The coldness that once protected them has melted into calm awareness. They've learned that boundaries and love are not opposites, they are partners. To love wisely is to love freely, without fear, without exhaustion. Their compassion now moves with direction. It flows where it is received, and withdraws where it's wasted. They've stopped apologizing for who they are, for being deep in a shallow world, for seeing too much, feeling too much, needing time alone to recharge. Their difference is no longer something to hide, it's their gift, their truth, their edge. When they look at the world now, they don't see brokenness they must fix. They see souls in their own becoming, each on a path that cannot be rushed. They offer kindness when it's welcome, distance when it's needed, and silence when words would only wound. They have become the empath who chooses, who gives from fullness, not fear, who loves with boundaries, not desperation, who feels deeply but stands strong. The awakening was never about becoming colder. It was about learning to hold love without burning. Their heart, once fragile, now beats steady with power. Awakened, whole, free,